Yanju stared intensely at the flickering monitor as his fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. On the screen, the legendary boss Jig Sufu let out a final, digital scream before collapsing into pixels. A massive golden notification appeared, announcing Yanju as the first player to ever clear the final level. Suddenly, the electricity in his entire apartment building flickered and died with a heavy thud. A strange vibrating hum began to emanate from the center of his small bedroom floor. The space itself seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of binary code and magical energy. From the center of the rift, a feminine hand reached out and gripped the edge of his wooden desk. Jig Sufu stepped into the physical world, her yellow eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. Yanju realized this wasn't a dream when he felt the sheer pressure of her presence crushing the air. The game boss tilted her head, her long hair flowing as if moved by an unseen wind. Outside, the sounds of car crashes and screams began to echo through the city streets. Yanju looked out the window to see his classmates transforming into rotting, gray-skinned monsters. He turned back to the summoned boss, realizing she was his only hope for survival in this madness. A digital system window popped up in front of Yanju's eyes, confirming his new status as a summoner. The door to his room suddenly shook under the force of a violent, hungry pounding from outside. Jig Sufu slowly drew her shimmering blade, the steel humming with a deadly magical resonance. Yanju checked his stats and saw that his reset talent was already active and ready. The door burst open as a zombified student lunged into the room with a guttural snarl. In a blur of motion, Jig Sufu moved across the room and decapitated the creature in a single strike. Black blood splattered across the floor as the monster's body turned into ash and vanished. Yanju grabbed his sturdy survival backpack and a metal baseball bat from under his bed. Jig Sufu turned to him, her expression unreadable as she waited for her summoner's command. He signaled for her to follow him as he stepped out into the chaotic, blood-stained hallway. More screams erupted from the floors above as the infection spread like wildfire through the building. A group of 3 zombies rounded the corner, their joints clicking audibly in the silence. Yanju pointed his bat at them, and Sufu lunged forward like a streak of golden lightning. The sound of slicing flesh and breaking bones filled the corridor as she dismantled the horde. Experience points floated into Yanju's vision, increasing his level in real time. He knew they had to reach the school cafeteria where the other survivors might be gathered. As they moved, the walls of the school began to transform into jagged purple dungeon stones. The very layout of the building was changing into a complex, deadly labyrinth. Sufu stayed close to his side, her yellow eyes scanning every shadow for hidden threats. A sudden earth-shaking roar vibrated from the staircase leading to the first floor. A massive mutated zombie boss with multiple arms pulled itself up from the floor below. Yanju gripped his bat tighter, knowing this was a fight he couldn't win alone. He looked at Sufu and nodded, triggering a joint attack skill he remembered from the game. Sufu leaped into the air, her sword gathering the energy of the surrounding rift. She brought the blade down, creating a massive shockwave that pulverized the boss's head. Yanju panted heavily as the loot dropped from the boss's remains in the form of glowing orbs. One of the items was a strange, pulsating black heart that shouldn't have been in this level. Sufu stepped back, her expression showing fear for the first time since she arrived. A voice boomed through the hallway, echoing not from a person, but from the system itself. It warned that a world event had been triggered by his illegal summoning. Far down the corridor, the sound of rhythmic marching began to grow louder and louder. Yanju realized that the monsters they just fought were only the warm-up for what was coming. A massive health bar appeared across the sky outside, belonging to something far beyond his level. He looked at the black heart in front of him, wondering if touching it would be his salvation or his end. As his fingers brushed the dark crystal, the world around him began to dissolve into a blinding white light. The blinding white light faded slowly, leaving Yanju standing in the center of a distorted reality where his school hallway looked like a Gothic cathedral. A translucent blue interface flickered into existence directly in front of his eyes, pulsing with a rhythmic digital heartbeat. The text on the screen announced that the reset talent system had been successfully integrated into his soul. He reached out to touch the floating icon that looked like a golden hourglass wrapped in silver chains. Beside him, Jig Sufu materialized from the shadows, her yellow eyes scanning the perimeter for any signs of movement. She whispered a low caution, noting that the atmosphere was thick with the scent of ancient blood and stale earth. Suddenly, a swarm of bats burst from the rafters, their screeching cries echoing off the high stone ceilings. Yanju dove to the floor as the shadows began to coalesce into a tall, regal figure at the end of the hall. The vampire ancestor emerged from the darkness wearing a tattered crimson cape that seemed to flow like liquid blood. A group of trapped students huddled in a nearby classroom watching the monster through the shattered glass of the door. Yanju realized he could not win with brute strength, so he activated his reset talent for the first time. Time seemed to stutter and rewind, showing him a ghostly vision of the vampire's next 3 moves. Armed with this foresight, he signaled Jig Sufu to strike the moment the monster lunged toward his left flank. The vampire ancestor moved with supernatural speed, but Jig Sufu was already there, her blade clashing against his razor-sharp claws. Yanju navigated his menu screen mid-combat, reallocating his skill points into agility to match the boss's tempo. The monster let out a sonic screech that shattered the remaining windows and sent Yanju tumbling backward. Seeing her master in danger, Jig Sufu unleashed a torrent of yellow energy that formed a protective barrier around him. Yanju noticed a glowing core hidden beneath the vampire's ribcage, pulsating with a rhythmic purple light. He shouted for the hidden students to throw their heavy chemistry supplies at the monster to create a distraction. Beakers of acid shattered against the vampire's skin, causing him to roar in frustration as smoke hissed from his shoulders. Taking advantage of the opening, Yanju sprinted forward, his feet barely touching the ground as his new stats kicked in. He plunged a silver-tipped dagger directly into the purple core, feeling the rush of massive experience points flooding his system. The vampire ancestor dissolved into a cloud of black ash, leaving behind a glowing legendary treasure chest. Yanju knelt before the chest, his hands trembling with anticipation as he prepared to claim his reward. Inside lay the Cloak of Shadows, a legendary item that granted the user absolute invisibility for short bursts. The rescued students poured out of the classroom thanking Yanju for saving their lives from the nightmare. However, the peace was short-lived as a loud announcement boomed from the sky, declaring the start of the second wave. Yanju checked his map, seeing several high-level boss markers appearing all over the campus grounds. He told the students to barricade themselves in the gym while he and Jig Sufu cleared a path to the armory. As they moved, he noticed that Jig Sufu's level had increased, her armor now shimmering with a new metallic sheen. She explained that as her summoner grew stronger, her own latent powers would continue to unlock. They reached the stairs, but the floor below was submerged in a thick, bubbling black tar. Eye stalks began to emerge from the tar, blinking rapidly as they locked onto the intruders. Yanju used his reset talent again, searching for a timeline where they could cross the floor without being touched. He leaped onto a floating locker, timing his jumps perfectly between the rising tentacles of the tar beast. Jig Sufu followed with a graceful somersault, her boots barely grazing the surface of the corruption. They finally reached the school entrance, but a massive wall of fire blocked their way to the outside world. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the flames, mocking Yanju's attempts to play hero in a world built for monsters. Yanju gripped his new cloak tightly, knowing that his journey had only just begun. As the fire surged forward to consume them, the ground suddenly vanished and they began falling into a pitch-black abyss. The darkness swallowed them whole as they plummeted into the unknown void. Yanju quickly activated his gravity nullification skill to slow their descent. They landed softly on a shifting stone platform that pulsed with ancient energy. Massive stone gears began to turn, signaling the start of the labyrinth's final trial. A giant digital timer appeared in the sky, counting down the minutes until total world deletion. Yanju looked at the countdown and knew they had to find the core immediately. Jig Sufu gripped her scythe tightly, sensing a powerful presence approaching through the mist. A bolt of yellow lightning crashed down, revealing the arrogant figure of Thunder. Thunder laughed, claiming that only the strongest player deserved to rule the new reality. He launched a massive wave of electricity toward Yanju and Jig Sufu. Jig Sufu spun her scythe, creating a magical barrier that absorbed the shock. Yanju scanned Thunder's stats, identifying a critical weakness in his mana recovery. He shouted a command to Jig Sufu to target the ground beneath Thunder's feet. She leaped into the air, bringing her scythe down with world-shattering force. Thunder tried to dodge, but the ground turned into a digital trap, rooting him in place. Yanju appeared behind him, his digital blade crackling with reset energy. With one swift strike, Yanju severed Thunder's connection to the labyrinth's power source. Thunder screamed as his electric aura dissipated into harmless sparks. The villainous player dissolved into data, leaving behind a legendary core item. Yanju grabbed the core and ran toward the labyrinth's heart as the timer hit 1 minute. Jig Sufu followed closely, fending off the last of the labyrinth's automated sentries. They reached the central chamber, a place where reality and code were indistinguishable. Yanju placed the legendary core into the central pillar to initiate the world reset. For a moment, the system flickered, threatening to crash the entire world. Yanju used his reset talent one last time, pouring all his mana into the pillar. Jig Sufu placed her hand on his shoulder, sharing her power to stabilize the process. A massive shockwave of pure energy erupted from the labyrinth, sweeping across the globe. The zombies in the streets began to dissolve, turning back into the humans they once were. The dark dungeons and floating game islands started to vanish from the sky. Yanju and Jig Sufu found themselves back in the quiet ruins of their school classroom. The system interface appeared one last time, declaring Wong Yanju the world's first ranker. However, the best reward was that Jig Sufu remained in the real world, no longer tied to the game. The world had changed forever, but the immediate danger had finally passed. News broadcasts began to fill the silence, reporting on the Great Restoration across the continents. Yanju turned to Jig Sufu and asked her what she wanted to do now that she was free. She tilted her head and suggested they start by conquering the local ramen shop. Yanju laughed, a sound he hadn't made since the apocalypse began. He knew that while the game was over, their real adventure was just beginning. He was no longer just a pro gamer, but the guardian of a new era. With his virtual wife by his side, Wong Yanju stepped forward into the bright future of a restored world.